Incredible black janitor discovered hidden symptoms ignored by all, saved millionaire CEO's life. George had never imagined his lowly position could ever intersect with the high-stakes world of a millionaire CEO. The prestigious corporate headquarters, where he worked in downtown Chicago, buzzed with ambition, while he silently honed his craft, scrubbing floors and polishing glass. Tasks he approached with the diligence of a master artisan. But that afternoon, as he pushed his mop through an empty conference room, something gnawed at him. It was Laura, the company's CEO. He'd seen her in passing, but her tired eyes, sunken and almost pleading, stirred something deep within. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that her world was collapsing under her beautifully crafted facade. Was her health deteriorating? And if so, could he, an invisible man in a suit-and-tie environment, reach out? He pondered this with each sweep of his mop. The stark contrast between their lives weighed heavily on him. Here he was, a 45-year-old janitor striving to make ends meet, while she inhabited a world of prestige and privilege. In his reality, self-respect was paramount, but would his humble status allow him to venture into the realm of the powerful? The corporate ethos dictated that survival meant keeping one's head down, pushing through exhaustion, and ignoring the profound struggles of others. Yet as he noticed the undercurrents of tension in her demeanor, the frosty silence in front of her team, the quiet desperation, it felt irresponsible not to act. He found himself at an impasse, the stirrings of conscience colliding with an instinct for self-preservation. What if he intervened, only to be met with ridicule or worse, repercussions against his job? He inhaled sharply, feeling the familiar anxiety grip him. He was a janitor, not a savior, but as the cleaning solution dripped from his mop and pooled on the floor, a growing urge beckoned him and he fought it. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. George's internal struggle escalated as he became acutely aware of her symptoms. A slight tremor in her hands during meetings, an inability to focus while addressing her team. With each new observation, unease transformed into a sense of moral duty. What was he supposed to do with this knowledge? He imagined confronting her. The words felt foreign on his tongue. Would she dismiss him? The glaring realities of class and power hovered like a storm cloud. Warding off despair, he sought solace in Mr. Johnson, the wise mentor from his community. Their conversations grew late and heavy with existential weight. George wrestled with every word of advice, feeling their depth seep into him like ink on paper. It was clear he had to navigate this treacherous corporate jungle to protect Laura, not only from herself, but from the stigmas embedded in their society. He needed to break through the glass ceiling, both literally and metaphorically. As George circled back to the idea of broaching the topic with Laura, he stumbled upon an unexpected truth. Their families were intertwined, history binding them in ways neither had fathomed. Just when it seemed the lines were drawn, new connections flourished. But when he thought he might finally step forward, the weight of corporate expectations surged around him. A misstep in the workplace transformed into a precarious precipice that could strip away everything he held dear. The air crackled with tension as uncertainty spiraled, blocking the path to redemption, leaving readers to wonder, would George's courage propel him to take that step, or would fear paralyze him forever in the shadows? Caught in the whirlwind of his thoughts, George found his mind racing. He needed a plan. The stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just a matter of a simple conversation. It was about impacting a life that was worlds apart from his own. Time slipped away as days turned into a blur. With each sunrise, he wrestled with the decision, dissecting every potential outcome. He could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on him, not just from within, but from the very fabric of the corporate environment he navigated daily. His interactions with Mr. Johnson became a refuge. Each visit, filled with layered conversations, allowed George to peel back his insecurities. "You have a voice," Mr. Johnson had told him one evening, the glow of the lamp casting a warm light that felt almost sacred. "No matter the uniform you wear, your words are powerful." That affirmation lingered with George, igniting a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. One evening after work, drenched in perspiration from wiping surfaces and lifting heavy trash bags, George stopped in front of a large glass window overlooking the skyline. Reflections of ambition danced on the surface, blurring his image. A whisper of urgency rustled in his chest. What if he didn't say anything? What if he lost the chance to alter the trajectory of Laura's life? His hand pressed against the cold glass as if seeking a connection with the world outside, the world that often felt locked away behind barriers he could not breach. That night he laid awake, the quiet hum of his humble apartment making thoughts roar in his mind. He scribbled notes in a notebook, contemplating every angle, rehearsing phrases he might use to convey concern without presumption. With each stroke of the pen, he began to see his thoughts as more than wishful thinking. They were transforming into strategies. It was no longer about just being a janitor. He was becoming an advocate. The following day, the atmosphere at the office felt heavier. George noticed the subtle crumpling of Laura's brow as she paced the hall, her heels clicking like a countdown clock. Each moment trapped him in decision-making purgatory. He frequently exchanged glances with her, gauging if there was a crack in the wall she had built around herself. It was a push and pull of wanting to help, while simultaneously fearing the repercussions of his presence in her world. As the days swept by, he felt himself inching closer to a breaking point. His cleaning duties, intermingling with fleeting thoughts of intervention, began to warp his perception. The mundane tasks, mopping, dusting, and sanitizing, became laced with significance. Each interaction with Laura began to shift from mere observation to a readiness to engage. The moment drew near. He could feel an invisible tether between them tightening, and as he clocked in that morning, determination sparked anew. Would he lean into the discomfort and become the bridge across their disparate worlds? Today was different. He could feel it in his bones. He sought to position himself near her office, attempting to catch her eye as she emerged from a meeting. The thunderous rhythm of his heart resonated in the stillness of the corridor, drowning out everything else. Suddenly, she stepped into view, the hint of fragility woven into her hurried stride. His breath hitched. Would she see the person beneath the uniform, or would he merely remain invisible? As she turned and their eyes locked, George felt a jolt of recognition surge through both of them, an unspoken understanding teetering between urgency and fear. The air thickened with anticipation. But as George edged forward, potential words swirling on his tongue, a voice called out from behind him, shattering the moment and the silence. "George, can you come here for a second?" He froze, trapped between two worlds, suddenly aware that the path to change might just unravel with his next decision. Would he let this chance slip away? Or would he find the courage to step into the light, a space where he could finally align his actions with his convictions? The sudden call shattered George's moment of clarity. He turned slowly, heart pounding as he faced his supervisor, a middle-aged man clad in a crisp white shirt and dark tie. George's thoughts raced, internally grappling with the irony of being pulled back into his role just when he felt ready to step forward. "Yes, sir," he replied, each syllable laden with the weight of unspoken words. The supervisor gestured towards a pile of discarded office supplies, a mess left behind after an organization overhaul. George took a breath and nodded, diverting his attention back to the task at hand. It was an unwelcome distraction, but part of him believed that perhaps further delaying his approach to Laura might serve as a necessary buffer. The emotional pressure was palpable. As he sorted through the chaos of staplers and shredded paper, George's mind remained fixated on the looming interaction with Laura. Each click of the stapler echoed his thoughts. Why was he letting this opportunity slip through his fingers? The stark reality pressed against him. If he did not act soon, he might never break through. He finished cleaning the area, and a flicker of resolution ignited. He could not dwell in indecision forever. Moments later, as the corridor emptied, he caught sight of Laura again. Surrounded by a flurry of colleagues and phone calls, she appeared like a ship lost in a storm of responsibilities. It seemed almost futile, the thought of slipping through the cracks of her world. But another part of him surged with the recognition that this was not just fear. It was a signal of movement, evolution. After collecting himself, George strolled past the conference room to where Laura stood, a mix of confidence and vulnerability in play. This wasn't just a moment about him, it was about her. His mind raced back to Mr. Johnson's words, "You have a voice." With each repetition, it became less an echo and more an internal anthem. Finally, he approached Laura, his pulse quickening. "Excuse me, Laura, do you have a moment?" he managed to say, his voice steady but soft, the uniform feeling less burdensome now. Laura turned, surprise crossing her features. "Yes, George?" The questions writhed in his mind, and he fought against the tide of self-doubt that threatened to drown him. He noticed the faint lines under her eyes, subtle markers of unspoken stress, each one urging him to rise above the boundaries dictated by their positions. "Honestly, I've seen you working really hard, and I wanted to check in," he said, holding on to the charged atmosphere. "I know we don't really interact much, but it seemed like you might be dealing with something challenging." Her brow furrowed, and he saw a flicker of what he hoped was recognition, but would he misinterpret it? His heart raced again as he pushed himself to be more vulnerable. "I know it might sound out of place, but sometimes talking to someone outside your circle can help. Like you, I've had my moments, and if you want to share, I'm here to listen." The air hung thick with the weight of his words. Laura hesitated, her defenses visibly wavering as if etched in the fabric of her suit. He watched as she processed the unexpected openness, and he felt a tiny spark of hope ignite within him. "Thank you, George," she said finally, her voice losing a bit of its edge. But even as a cautious smile began to unfold on her lips, something behind her eyes revealed turmoil. George's heart sank. Was she too far gone to hear him, or was this the start of something that could lead to understanding? Before he could respond, another voice, the familiar tone of a senior manager, cut through the moment, inviting her back into the whirlwind of work. Laura turned, her demeanor shifting instantly as her mask reappeared. "Can we talk later?" she asked, a hint of regret lacing her question. George nodded. The familiar mix of hope and fear ignited anew. He had taken a step, but it felt so tenuous, so burgeoning. The path ahead remained clouded, filled with risks and uncertainties. As he watched her retreat into the fray, a sense of urgency enveloped him. Half of his heart surged with potential breakthrough, while the other half pulsed with an unease he had yet to shake. The questions still lingered in the air. Had he truly made an impact, or had he simply stirred the dust only to see it settle once again? What would it take for him to bridge the chasm between them firmly? This uncertainty pressed him toward the next day, a fresh start, where more truths could be unearthed. Would he find the right words to encourage Laura to lean in, to trust him with her struggles? The prospect loomed large, teasing the edges of possibility as he stepped back into the fray of his janitorial duties, anticipating the chance to start anew yet again. The day dawned. Yet George felt as though time had slowed to a crawl. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, each flicker echoing the unrest within him. Another layer of his uniform weighed heavy on his shoulders, but today it felt less like a shackle and more like armor. With every sweep of the mop, he contemplated the conversation with Laura that still hung in the air, tantalizingly unresolved. He had taken a step, a bold step, but what came next? The encounter had ignited a smoldering mix of courage and fear, pushing him to the edge of his comfort zone. As he cleaned the corridors, methodical, steady, his mind raced. How could he ensure she felt safe enough to reveal her struggles? It wasn't merely about him, it was about building a bridge through shared vulnerabilities. With each task, George envisioned the platforms needed to support such a candid exchange. Perhaps he could offer her a gesture of genuine connection, an invitation to share coffee outside the office's constant commotion. It struck him as simple yet profound, a setting that might encourage her to lower her defenses. But it was more than just logistical planning. There was a moral dimension to navigate. Did he really have the right to pry into her burdens? Would the vulnerability he was trying to create backfire? Those thoughts burrowed deeper into him and began to fester, ensuring he remained acutely aware of his intentions. He hoped they were pure. As the minutes turned into hours, the natural rhythm of work carried him to the break room. Taking a moment to breathe, he watched as colleagues filtered in and out, oblivious to the storm swirling inside him. He needed to find Laura. The anticipation and anxiety made it feel as though the world around him existed in slow motion. The coffee machine gurgled like thunder in his ears. Determined, he grabbed 2 cups and headed toward her office, heart racing once again. The improvised moment nagged at him, layered with his burgeoning resolve. Before he could lose momentum, he knocked gently on her office door. "Laura, do you have a minute?" She looked up from a mountain of paperwork, her expression softening as recognition sparked in her eyes. The tension that had knotted in George's stomach quivered, leveling at the hint of familiarity. "Oh, hey, George," she said, her voice warm but cautious. "What's up?" Setting 1 cup on her desk, he felt a rush of adrenaline. "I thought you might like a break. Not much can get done without some caffeine, right?" Laura chuckled softly, her initial reserve melting slightly as she accepted the cup. Their fingers brushed for an instant, and George felt a shock of connection, an unspoken acknowledgement that both shared a weight they were trying to lighten. "Thanks," she said, her smile widening just a little. It was a small victory, but in that moment he sensed a glimmer of hope. He hesitated, the weight of the conversation looming once more. "I wanted to check in. You seemed so overwhelmed yesterday. If you need someone to help carry that weight, I'm willing to listen." The moment hung heavy, and he could almost see the wall she had built around her begin to waver. But just as she opened her mouth to speak, a ringing phone cut through the moment, yanking her back to the grind. "Sorry, I have to take this," she said hurriedly, her mask pulling back into place. George nodded, swallowing his disappointment with a deep breath. Even so, her lingering gaze sent shivers of resolve racing through him. She had shown a sliver of willingness, and he had to cling to that. That night, as George returned to his modest apartment, thoughts swirled in a kaleidoscope of what-ifs. He had brushed against something deeper in Laura, but it could just as easily slip away into obscurity. Growing increasingly aware of his own feelings, he contemplated if this was more than altruism. What if he was yearning for a connection, for someone to open up to him in return? It took a profound shift to acknowledge this want. Could he really put himself out there, expose his vulnerabilities as he had urged her to do? With that thought, a chilling realization hit him. He was setting the stage for both of them, yet he had neglected his own emotional landscape. It wouldn't just be her opening up, he needed to reveal his own depths too. The next day, a decision loomed before him. He had to confront the unexamined emotions brewing within, and just as he committed to sharing his own struggles with Laura, a new question emerged. Were they ready to face their ghosts together? The stakes were rising, and the path toward connection sparked a thrilling uncertainty. But this time, it felt more significant than just a conversation. He had to prepare himself. Facing the truth could just change everything. The following day, George arrived at work with a mix of determination and trepidation. Each step toward the office felt like a mini exploration of his resolve, shaping his understanding of the vulnerability he wanted to embrace. His heart hammered as he recalled his intention to be open with Laura. It was an awkward realization, this pressure to divulge his own struggles. The corridor felt more exhausting today. Each sweep of the mop felt imbued with purpose. He envisioned the floor as a canvas of sorts, each stroke erasing the barriers he had built around himself. By the time he reached the break room, he had rehearsed his words countless times in his head. The swirling coffee reflected the chaos in his mind as he poured himself a cup, each drop reinforcing his commitment to share his emotions. As he sipped, George observed the camaraderie amongst his colleagues. Laughter echoed from the next room. There was a warmth he had never quite felt a part of. He wondered if this was the comfort that came from mutual understanding, something he longed to cultivate with Laura. With a sudden jolt, he realized he couldn't postpone this any longer. "Just do it," he whispered to himself, the mantra feeling urgent and liberating. With newfound resolve, he approached Laura's office. The door was slightly ajar, a deliberate signal that she was open for a conversation, or so he hoped. As he stepped inside, anxiety danced in his chest, but he quickly squashed it down. "Laura?" He knocked softly, waiting for her acknowledgement before entering. "Hey, George." She looked up, surprise flickering across her features. "I didn't expect to see you this morning. Thought I'd see if you wanted to talk," he offered, his voice steadier than he felt. This could be the moment of vulnerability he had envisioned. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, but even in her smile, George sensed an undercurrent of hesitation. "Sure. What's on your mind?" A battle played out within him. Fear clashed against his yearning for connection. He couldn't just recite his rehearsed lines. He needed to be authentic. "I've been thinking about yesterday, about how we all have struggles. Sometimes it just helps to share what weighs us down." His heart pounded as he pushed through the barrier of thoughts. "I realized I have my burdens too, and in a way, I'm willing to be honest if you are. We don't have to go through it alone, right?" She regarded him cautiously, her hands clasped tightly. "That's true, George. But, what do you mean by burdens?" "I've felt lost, adrift in my own world. It's hard to articulate, but I think sharing might help." He hesitated but pressed forward. "Seeing you yesterday, it resonated with me more than you can imagine. I'm tired of masking my feelings. I want to make a space where we can both be honest, if you're open to it." As he spoke, George caught a flicker of recognition in Laura's eyes. It was as if a light flickered between them, revealing shared shadows. But just as quickly, her expression clouded. "It's just, I've built walls, you know. I've been focusing on survival." His stomach dropped. They were at a crossroads. "Maybe we can help each other break those walls down," he offered, his voice nearly trembling. "I want to be there for you, but I also need someone to lean on." Tension filled the air, thick enough to slice. Laura's silence felt eternal, yet her body language betrayed a brewing tempest. She bit her lip, wavering as if battling her own doubts about trust. George felt raw, exposed, and painfully aware that each second of indecision stretched across the chasm separating them. "I could try," she finally said, a hint of vulnerability in her voice, a fragile yet significant concession. The ground beneath them quaked with possibility. "That's a start," George replied, surprised by how suddenly hope surged within him. As they ventured into this shared territory of honesty, he also became acutely aware of how profound the stakes were becoming. Both unraveling their truths felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to leap into unknown depths. Little did George know that sharing even one small story would trigger a cascade of revelations neither of them anticipated, pushing the boundaries of their connection in unforeseen ways. The moment of sharing drew closer, but shadows lingered just beyond the light they had cast together. With reality closing in, George wondered how deep their dialogue would take them and what secrets might emerge in the process. Could facing their demons together expose both their hidden strengths? Would they be able to navigate the dangers that surfaced with emotional honesty? Only time would reveal whether they were truly ready to confront the ghosts lingering at the edges of their thoughts. As the days unfolded, George felt the weight of his decision to embrace vulnerability. Each conversation with Laura was a step into uncharted territory, a realm where honesty tangled with hesitance. Their respective barriers, once impenetrable, seemed to tremble under the forces of shared confessions and reluctant trust. The following week brought a hint of change. George meticulously arranged his work schedule, carving out time meant not only for mopping floors, but also for encounters with Laura. Every break became a window of opportunity, filled with tentative discussions that blurred the lines between professional decorum and personal revelations. One afternoon, while the sun spilled golden rays into the break room, George found himself stealing glances at Laura as she poured her coffee. The moment felt heavy with unspoken truths, a shared understanding dancing on the edge of their words. It was infectious, compelling him to step past the surface of simple pleasantries. "You've been quiet today," he remarked, feigning nonchalance while searching her expression for clues to her inner world. Laura glanced up, her brow furrowing with contemplation. "Just thinking about some things. Honestly, it's hard sometimes, you know." His heart thudded in his chest. She was ready to peel back the layers. "Tell me about it. I'm all ears." She hesitated. "I haven't really opened up much about my past." The admission struck George like a lightning bolt, igniting both curiosity and empathy. "We all have our stories. It's just a matter of trusting someone to hear them." She bit her lip, vulnerability expressed through her body language. "It's just been a lot. I didn't expect to feel this way. It's like I'm trying to be strong, but it's so exhausting." "Strength isn't just about holding it all together," he replied, his voice steady. "It can be about sharing the load. I've realized that recently. I thought I had everything figured out, but it turns out I don't. And that's okay." For a fleeting moment, he saw a glimmer in her eyes, a flicker of hope resonating beneath the surface. "Really? You feel that way?" "Absolutely. Sometimes I feel lost in my own life. Like I'm missing something important. I think it's pushed me to connect more, but I've also neglected parts of myself." Laura's posture softened, allowing a hint of relief to ripple between them. George had risked honesty, and it had translated into comfort, an allyship being born. With a newfound willingness draping over them, he decided to reveal something from his life, pushing past the confines of a simple conversation. "There was a time when I was really struggling, deep down. I was so scared to be authentic with anyone. I kept pretending everything was all right while feeling utterly lost." Her eyes narrowed, absorbing every word. "What changed?" "Honestly, it took one moment of clarity. I saw someone like me, reach out. The courage they showed was staggering. It made me question what I truly valued in my life." George paused. The realization struck him again, the necessity of connection. Maybe his journey was not just about himself, but also about forming bridges between parallel struggles. Visibly encouraged, Laura nodded. "It's just hard to know where to begin. I keep second-guessing myself." "Then let's start small. You can share something simple, a memory, a feeling." George's soft tone disarmed the tension. Her sigh resonated with uncertainty, but she made a move to lean forward, easing the emotional distance. "Okay, There's this memory from my childhood that's always lingered. As she opened up, a door creaked ajar, revealing shadows of her past. George listened intently, allowing her stories to linger in the space between them. For each truth Laura shared, he felt a flicker within himself, an awareness that he was dismantling his own armor, brick by careful brick. But as the minutes passed, he sensed a swell in the air, a sensation that the conversation was building towards an emotional peak. What surfaced in the depths of their exchange might awaken buried feelings, not just between them, but also within themselves. With shadows beginning to give way to the light, George contemplated what deeper truths might be unearthed as Laura spoke. Would they remain unscathed, or would this newfound intimacy lead them to confront parts of their lives that had long been silenced? As Laura's voice trailed off, George prepared himself for the uncharted territory that lay ahead, understanding this was merely the prelude to a much larger revelation. Would they dare to explore the recesses of their vulnerabilities, or would fear compel them back into silence? The minutes hung heavily in the air as George processed Laura's words, the emotional weight of her stories resonating. After a poignant pause, curiosity spurred him to respond. That memory, it must have shaped you in ways that are hard to unravel. Laura nodded, her posture regaining the slightest rigidity as she shifted into reflection. It did. I've always felt that those early experiences colored how I interact with others. I've built walls, and I can't help but wonder if I've kept out the good along with the bad. George contemplated her admission, recognizing a familiar echo of his own defensiveness. Maybe it's time to start taking those walls down. Not all connections are harmful, after all. Some can bring light. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she scrutinized him, searching for sincerity in his intent. What do you mean? I mean, he began, clarifying his thoughts, that the more I've engaged with you, the more I realize I've been missing something crucial. Not just in my job, but in life, authentic connections, and discovering this with you has been an unexpected journey. Laura shifted, visibly warmed by his openness. That's brave, George. Honestly, I wish I could be as brave as you seem right now. As she spoke, George felt a moment of uncertainty slice through the burgeoning connection. A fear of judgment lingered. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, he replied, summoning his courage to challenge his own insecurity. It's acknowledging it and choosing to act anyhow. Encouraged by their exchange, he continued, fueled by the hope that together they could transcend their apprehensions. Tell me about someone who has shaped your beliefs about vulnerability. She paused, her expression thoughtful, then her gaze dropped to the floor. My dad. He had this way of having deep conversations, but after he passed, I felt compelled to bury those talks. I didn't want to experience that pain again. George's heart clenched, recognizing the magnitude of her trust. Is that loss why you push people away? Probably, Laura murmured, a touch of sadness coloring her voice. I thought distancing myself would protect me, but it's left me feeling so alone. George resonated with that loneliness. It was something he had danced around for far too long. You're not alone, though. If we keep hiding, we'll never discover what we might gain, he urged, leaning into their shared understanding. The break room felt like it had transformed into a sanctuary of sorts, a safe harbor where their fears could coalesce and dissolve. Just then, the faint sound of footsteps broke their bubble of connection. Laura's office mate peeked in and waved. With a hint of a smile, she returned the gesture, albeit with a distant expression that spoke of the weight of unshared truths. Would you look at that? Laura murmured, looking away as George felt a rush of trepidation stirring within. Guess we should get back to work. He didn't want the conversation to end. The air was charged with possibility. Do you think we could continue this somewhere else, outside of work? His boldness squared with the gravity of his questions. Where was this connection taking them? Laura's gaze flickered back to him, a faint flash of hope clashing with lingering doubt. "I'd like that, but what if we stumble into territory we can't handle?" "We've already ventured this far. Embracing the unknown might just guide us to the clarity we seek," he replied, inviting her to consider the option of exploration. As Laura hesitated, fear and intrigue painting her features, he sensed the point of no return. They stood at a crossroads between comfort and risk, understanding that whatever path they chose could liberate or ensnare them further. Would she step forth into this new dynamic, risking the safety of their current interactions? The question lingered in the air, on the precipice of decision, as George braced himself for the answer, whatever that may be. The silence stretched, palpable and electric, as Laura's mind raced. George stood steady, his expression inviting yet wary. Moments like these held the weight of unspoken truths and new beginnings that could change the course of their lives. George felt an urgency coil within him. He realized that this was more than a casual conversation. It was about risking vulnerability to uncover a deeper understanding of themselves. "Okay," Laura finally breathed, the word barely a whisper, emerging from a storm of uncertainty. "Let's meet after work. I can agree to that, but I am not sure where it'll lead us." A powerful rush of exhilaration mingled with fear ignited in George's chest. "That's all I'm asking for, to step outside and talk," he replied, trying to quell any lurking doubt in her eyes. "It could be the thing that helps you understand those walls." Her lips twitched into a tentative smile, and despite the flicker of fear in her eyes, a tiny spark of hope glimmered back. "I suppose we could start by tearing down a few bricks at a time." The day rolled on, with an undercurrent of anticipation. George found his thoughts drifting toward the meeting that loomed ahead. The normalcy of office life felt surreal. Conversations droned in the background as he reviewed reports, but his heart drummed only for the forthcoming encounter. He had considered countless outcomes, each painting a different picture of these newly entwined paths. As the clock eventually struck 5, George's pulse quickened. He exhaled deeply, trying to shake off the nerves while he headed toward their agreed meeting spot, a quiet coffee shop not far from the office, chosen for its anonymity and welcoming ambiance. Upon entering, George scanned the room. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the laughter of scattered conversations. He settled on a small table in the corner, the light casting soft shadows over his face. As he anxiously awaited Laura's arrival, each minute felt like a lifetime. Self-doubt clawed at the edges of his consciousness. Were they truly prepared for this? Could they navigate the intricacies of vulnerability without getting lost in it? Finally, he spotted her approaching, a hint of hesitance in her stride. Yet there was something different about her, a softness in her eyes, as though she had decided to embrace this moment both fully and fearfully. "Hi," she said, a mixture of nerves and excitement sparking in her voice. "Hey," he replied, standing to pull out a chair for her. "I'm really glad you came." As they settled in, Laura looked around, the ambient noise bubbling around them. "This place is nice. It feels different, doesn't it?" she remarked with a tentative smile. "It does. Kind of like a fresh start," George said, feeling the gravity of her words. Their conversation began to unfold with hesitation, a dance of vulnerability and guardedness. The small talk flowed into deeper realms, as George shared more about his battles with personal connections and the isolation he often felt. In turn, Laura opened up about her father's legacy, not just the conversations they had, but the memories laced with emotions that had shaped her beliefs about trust and love. Yet beneath the surface, George sensed something was amiss. As Laura spoke, a flicker of shadows crossed her features. He caught her gaze darting past him, and for a fleeting moment he wondered if she was contemplating retreat rather than engagement. "What is it?" he asked gently, sensing deeper turmoil beneath her facade. Laura hesitated, the conflict clear in her expression. "Sometimes I feel like I'm too broken for this. Like I'll ruin whatever this is." George leaned in closer, his voice softening in a protective manner. "We're all a bit broken, Laura. Maybe it's how we find strength, by acknowledging it, together." His words hung between them, and a wave of realization washed over him. Embracing vulnerability might just be the bravest thing either of them could do, but a dark undercurrent tugged at his thoughts. What would happen if they felt the sting of their comfort zones shattering? At that moment, George knew they were standing on the edge of something transformative, teetering between discovery and despair. The stakes had risen, igniting a deeper urgency to confront potential pitfalls in their budding connection. What truths awaited them both in the fragile phase of risk-taking? Would they emerge stronger or fall into the abyss of their fears? The questions lingered, and George could feel the gravity of the moment bearing down. It was a crossroads, the point of no return, where they could either rise to meet vulnerability or retreat back behind their protective walls. As Laura shifted in her seat, a question hung unspoken in the air, a fracture threatening to split all they had begun to build. Would she dare take the leap with him? As George's heart raced, he watched Laura process the weight of their exchange. The cafe's clatter faded, replaced by the thrum of their own thoughts. She glanced out the window, where the last rays of sunlight spilled across the pavement, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. George sensed an internal battle, and for a moment he felt helpless. What could he say to reassure her? Would his words be enough to bridge the chasm of her doubts? "Have you ever thought about how fear can be paralyzing?" Laura broke the silence, her voice steady, yet tinged with apprehension. "Like, it grips you and prevents you from experiencing anything beautiful." He nodded, his own insecurities bubbling to the surface. "I have. It's like being in a cage, knowing that outside it there's freedom, but you just can't will yourself to step out." The words resonated, electrifying the air between them. "I used to act like I was fine," she confessed, her gaze firmly on him now. "At work, I was the dependable one, avoiding any real emotional connection. But inside, I felt empty, like I was losing parts of myself." The admission struck George profoundly. He equated her struggle with the one he faced daily in navigating office politics, building relationships that felt forced, avoiding vulnerability. "And what made you reach for openness now?" he asked, intrigued by her journey. "I think it's this moment," Laura said, gesturing between them. "It's possible to break free if we let down our guards, right? But I don't know if I'm ready for the complexities that come with the risks." George felt a surge of determination. What if we discovered those complexities together? Not everything has to be dangerous or painful. There can be joy in the unknown too. The challenge sat heavily on his shoulders. For a while, she seemed to ponder his words. "You make it sound easy," she murmured, doubt creeping back into her tone. "But what if I open the door and find it too much to handle?" "Then we step back," he said, unwavering. "We're allowed to redefine the boundaries. But we can't do that if we close ourselves off. I want to face whatever lies ahead with you, even if it's terrifying." Her brow furrowed, and he could see the scabs of her past beginning to peel back. "Nobody's told me that. Not in a long time. It feels risky, like jumping off a cliff without knowing how deep the water is." George felt a pang of empathy. "It's a leap, but we can build a safety net together. I believe that. You have strength, Laura. I see it already. You're here now. Don't underestimate that." Their eyes locked, and in that fragile moment, a shared understanding danced between them. He had always been the cautious observer, accustomed to keeping his feelings at bay to avoid disappointment. But now, standing here with her, the urge to embrace honesty transcended fear. "I don't want to keep doing things the way I've always done them," Laura finally replied, her voice firmer. "I want more than just surviving." George's heart surged. This was the breakthrough he had been hoping for, the moment of courage that could redefine their relationship. Then let's discover what more means together. Together, she echoed, a tentative smile appearing. It was small, but significant, nourishing something they both longed for. However, just as energy began to weave the threads of possibility, her expression shifted. The flicker of hope seemed overshadowed by an external force. She stared past him again, the shadows returning to her gaze, and moments later he felt it, a shift in her demeanor, a recount of the past. "What if my past keeps creeping in?" she asked, torn between present courage and lingering dread. As if sensing the growing fog, George felt the tension coil anew. He had stepped into uncharted territory tonight, but there were still lingering threats beneath the surface. "Laura," he said, his voice carrying a newfound intensity, "the time has come to face the ghosts of our past. We can't let them dictate our future." She took a deep breath, determination mingling with fear. In that moment, George realized they were both on the cusp of something transformative, a confrontation that would require them to push through hidden dilemmas and face the specters that had haunted them for too long. The moment was teetering on the edge of clarity and chaos, torn between promise and peril. How could they move forward when fear cast such an imposing shadow? Would the journey to healing bind them closer, or would it further unravel her fragile thread of hope? In the days that followed, George stepped into a new rhythm. The atmosphere around him shifted as he embraced his role not just as a janitor, but as an advocate for vulnerability. He and Laura had shared their first tentative discussions outside the office, nurturing a connection that thrived on honesty, a delicate balance of understanding and facing fears. George found himself reflecting on their conversations, particularly the way they wrestled with their mutual pasts. Every moment spent with Laura, whether discussing her childhood memories or his own struggles, served as bricks being carefully laid, constructing a bridge between their worlds. They had moved from the anxiety of the unknown to the exhilarating empowerment of shared truth. One afternoon, while working diligently on the polished marble floors of the office, George was greeted by Jamie, the human resources manager. With her warm smile and genuine aura, she had always represented the very best of corporate culture. Today, however, her expression bore gravity. "George," she began, cutting through the ambient chatter of the office, "can we talk?" A flicker of apprehension tinged his thoughts. He followed her to a quieter conference room. Once comfortably seated, she fixed her gaze upon him. "I wanted to discuss your contributions over the past few weeks. I've noticed a significant change in how you communicate with others." His heart raced. "Thank you, but I'm just doing my job." "No, it's more than that. You've gone above and beyond, and I think your insights could benefit more than just your role here. I'm proposing a change in your responsibilities," she continued, pausing to gauge his reaction. "I think you'd thrive in a client-facing position, perhaps even as part of a team addressing workplace well-being." George sat back, grappling with the notion. The gentle prodding of courage that had filled him since engaging with Laura had transformed his self-perception. Finally, the whispers of his fears began to fade, overshadowed by a budding sense of purpose. From invisible to valued, he could hardly fathom the leap. "That sounds incredible," he finally said, emotions tightening his voice. "But I'm just a janitor. I don't know if I'm ready for that." Jamie's eyes twinkled with understanding. "Remember, George, everyone has a unique story to tell, and yours is essential to building this company culture. You've shown immense capability for empathy already. Imagine what you could achieve when paired with a leadership role." The proposal unfolded like a page, turning in a long-awaited book. George felt the exhilaration of a pioneer uncovering their strength. He thought of Laura's struggles to forge her identity amidst corporate expectations, and how their shared dialogues had answered his own questions about identity. Returning to his regular duties, the weight of this realization wrapped around him. He was not merely a janitor anymore. He was becoming a catalyst for change, now equipped to assist others in facing their demons with compassion. George made a conscious decision. He would accept the challenge put before him, embracing a spirit of growth. Days turned into weeks. He transitioned into his new role seamlessly, his previous experiences serving as a well of empathy towards clients and colleagues alike. The journey had its trials, but with each small victory came satisfying reinforcement of his capabilities. He arranged well-being workshops, utilizing everything he had learned from his own path of overcoming challenges in collaboration with Laura. In rare moments, late at the office, he and Laura reflected on their personal growth. Each conversation swirled with realization and newfound strength. The barriers they had once erected crumbled, replaced by transparency and confidence. She had also begun to step into her own truth, wielding her past as armor rather than a hindrance. Together, they not only grew personally, but professionally, evolving beyond their initial limitations. The culmination of their journey materialized one pivotal day when Laura stood before the board of directors, presenting a new initiative on workplace wellness, a plan she had developed alongside George. No longer was she just the CEO, but a leader breathing authenticity into her voice. It manifested as a powerful testimony to the potential synthesis of personal experience and professional purpose. After a successful meeting, she turned to George, her eyes alight with pride. "We did this together. I could never have done it alone." George's heart swelled with fulfillment. "This is just the beginning, Laura. We have so much more to accomplish." Standing there together amidst the executive accolades, George understood that their intertwined fates had not only mended their individual lives, but resonated throughout the company. His journey of taking risks as a janitor had brought him to a place of recognition, and he reveled in the clarity of his identity. In that moment, enveloped in gratitude and achievement, he knew he had transformed from the shadows into a beacon of purpose and connection. The convergence of their paths had uplifted them both, forging a resilient bond born of vulnerability and courage. They had ignited a ripple effect, one that could inspire countless others to step forward with their truths. This tenuous collaboration extended beyond personal growth, evolving into a framework for transformative change. George breathed in deeply, settled in this astonishing revelation of personal and professional metamorphosis. It was here, at the intersection of discovery and connection, that he realized his greatest achievement, not just surviving, but truly living, empowering others to face their own specters together. Now, take action and support our journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your engagement matters. Comment your thoughts and theories about this powerful conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. You must show your support and be part of this community. Don't wait even one more second.